We've got about 60 games left to play, and all the major contenders in both central divisions need to take a good long look in the mirror.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Sleeper. Swing for the fences on Sleeper Picks, and you can win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDON. You'll get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply, and see Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. Hey, today's podcast is being dropped on the 26th day of July 2023, and we're going to be talking about both central divisions. Both central divisions played early today. Both are already in the books. It's not even 1:30 in the afternoon here in California. And the four major contenders, well, they have some thinking to do, because the next 60 days are going to be really interesting. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and on Instagram. I am your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Hey, first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about the trivia question for the day. I had said who was the first person to hit a home run for the franchise that's currently known as the Tampa Bay Rays, who originally called the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. And I gave a little hint. I said the hint was he was a Hall of Famer. Now, it's funny, 'cause I got a couple of, and I put that Hall of Fame clue in there to kind of trip some people up, because Fred McGriff was part of the original Hall of Famer. Fred McGriff was part of that original Devil Rays squad, as was Wade Boggs. So you had a choice of two Hall of Famers. Which one was it? The answer is Wade Boggs. My buddy Marcel, all the way over there in Switzerland, guessed it correctly. So there you go. Marcel got it right. He got it right. Marcel, Wade Boggs got the first home run in the history of the Tampa Bay Rays. So there you go. There you go. We have a couple other things we just need to take care of here. But first and foremost, let's just go over the games in the Central. The games in the Central are all in the books right now for the major contenders right now. The first game was won by the Cleveland Guardians. The Guardians took on the Kansas City Royals. And the Royals, they're not good. We've established that they're not very good. And this game was over kind of sort of early. Cleveland was up 2-0 in the first, 3-0 in the second, 4-0 in the third, 7-0 in the fourth. And at that point, it was take it easy, boys, bring it on home. Its final score was 8-3, and it was an ugly game for Kansas City, and it was kind of just what the doctor orders for Cleveland. Jose Ramirez hit a pair of home runs. He got on base 4 times. He drove in 3 runs, and Williams, their big prospect, pitched 4 innings out of the start, and then the bullpen went the rest of the way. They only let up 3 runs, and Cleveland wound up winning that game and winning it handily. Now, the other interesting game, however, took place between the Minnesota Twins and the Seattle Mariners. Now, yikes. This was an interesting game in that the Mariners jumped ahead and had a pretty commanding 8-3 lead going into the 6th inning. And Dylan Moore hit a pair of home runs for the Seattle Mariners, and Bryce Miller looked like he was doing very well. Bryce Miller's pitched pretty well for Seattle for today, and it looked like it was going to be a pretty smooth Minnesota loss, or Seattle win in Minnesota is what I meant to say. And then Mr. Matt Wallner, wound up having a 2-home run game, and the Twins took it all the way to the end. Now, hey, good on the Mariners bullpen for hanging on and keeping them off the scoreboard after Bryce Miller fell apart in the 6th inning. There's going to be a name that's not going to appear in any write up of the game. He did not get a win, didn't get a loss, didn't get a save. But there's a Minnesota Twins pitcher by the name of Josh Winder. And Josh Winder, who's only played in, he's only played a handful of games this whole year. Josh Winder came out of the bullpen and gave the Twins 4 innings where he only let up 2 hits and 1 run. Didn't walk anybody, struck out 4, and kept, basically, save for that 1 run, kept Seattle off the board and preserved the Twins bullpen. And if this game went into extras, the Twins bullpen would be in relatively decent shape, but there's been some long games for the Twins recently. And lo and behold, the Mariners held on. And with that, the Twins, who've been playing really, really well recently, wound up losing a game and falling to 54 and 50. And with Cleveland's win, they're now at even 500. Even 500. Now, the National League is much easier to track down in terms of contenders because the 2 chief contenders, the Cincinnati Reds and the Milwaukee Brewers, locked antlers. And as Bob Uecker pointed out during the radio broadcast, oddly, this is the last time these 2 teams are going to meet. These are 2 teams that are going neck and neck for the National League Central title. And here we are. It's not even August, and this is their last meeting. Now, you can't really have the wisdom of knowing who the big matchups are going to be when you create the schedule. And with a balanced schedule, every team plays everyone else, and so you're not leaning against division rivals the same way. If you're not going to do that, then let's just abolish the divisions, because divisions are silly. But I digress. This was a classic pitcher's duel going into the 7th inning. The Reds had Lively on the mound, who threw shutout for the first 6 innings, and the Brewers handed the ball to Peralta, and Peralta was fantastic. Threw 6 shutout innings, didn't walk a batter, struck out 13. That's right, he had a 13-0 strikeout to walk ratio. He did not get a decision because, well, Reds couldn't score a run either. They took Peralta out after 6. The Reds decided to leave Lively in there. And look, it's hard to blame the guy. He he pitched into the 7th inning, pitched well, thank you very much. But Taylor came up, hit a 2-run home run, put Milwaukee on the board. The Brewers picked up a insurance run in the 8th inning and then handed the ball to Williams, who has been terrific as their closer. And with that, the Milwaukee Brewers wound up winning the game 3-0. And to me, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy that these 2 teams are not going to meet again for the rest of the year. I mean, if you take a look right now, I'm going to baseballreference.com, the single greatest website in the history of the planet Earth. And these 2 teams are going to be going at it, big time, because the Cardinals are not contending this year. The Cubs can't seem to figure out what they are. And these 2 teams are going to be the chief contenders. And if you take a look at the games, their first game, they didn't play each other until June 2nd, and they're done playing each other on the 26th of July. So there was 2 months where they played each other. Let's take a look at it. You had a 1-run game in extra innings. You had a 10-8 game. You had a 2-0 game. You had a 1-0 game, another 1-0 game, a 3-0 game, a 4-3 game, a 3-2 walk-off game, a 4-3 game, and then today, which was a shutout, double-edged shutout going into the 7th inning. You've had a bunch of games that have all been really competitive between these 2. Now, Cincinnati wound up having the upper hand big time. They played each other. Milwaukee has had the upper hand big time against Cincinnati. They played each other 13 times, and the Brewers won 10 of those games head-to-head. I want you to remember that when this season goes down the wire into the final months, that when they finished head-to-head 13 games, Milwaukee won 10 of them, and a bunch of them could have gone either way, a bounce here or a bounce there. Cincinnati, take a good long look in the mirror, because you're not going to be able to get them head on. Although, if this is any indication of how the Reds and Brewers play each other, maybe the Reds are happy they'll never see Milwaukee again. Well, that's the results of what happened. But now we got to figure out, what does all this really mean? Because you have these 4 teams with images of winning a division title dancing in their head. And with that, you have 60 games left roughly and some soul searching to do. Hey, this episode is brought to you by Ibotta. Now look, it's beautiful weather here, and I seem to be having a cookout every weekend. We had a cookout for the 4th of July. We had a cookout for the new birth of a baby for a friend of the family. We had a big cookout to celebrate their growing family. My cousin Josh is having his birthday this weekend, so we're having a big cookout for him. We are always picking up burgers, hot dogs. We grill salmon on there. We got the coleslaw on everything. And we were doing it all the time. And we're spending quality money on it. So why not get some cash back for the barbecue with Ibotta? You know, finally taking that summer vacation we've been planning, but dreading buying all the necessities for your time off. It's time to spend your hard-earned money without getting anything back in return. Enter Ibotta. Now look, I'm buying stuff all the time for my classroom. Ibotta, Ibotta, Ibotta. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop, and you'll get your cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns about $120 a year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, or a barbecue for that matter. And you can use the cash back to buy that flight you've been eyeing. Or maybe I'm going to buy concessions when I go see the Red Sox or the Giants this weekend. Other apps that give you point don't amount to much. Look, at Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Sephora, Best Buy, Macy's, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 for just trying Ibotta by using the code MLB when you register. Go to the App Store, the Google Play Store, and download the free Ibotta app and use the code MLB. That's IBOTTA at the Google Play or App Store, and use code MLB. Ibotta, you oughta. 60 games. 60 games. That's roughly what each team has. Roughly the entire schedule for the COVID year. That's what we got. Just a little bit more than, we're in late July. In a few days, it'll be August. It'll be the trade deadline. And you have all these teams bundled close together. Let's just take a look. By the time these standings they're valid now. They'll be valid when we wake up in the morning. Minnesota has a record of 54-50. Cleveland has a record of 51-51. That's 2 games that Minnesota's up on them, only 1 back in the loss column. By the way, for the final segment of today's show, I'm going to address a question about why people keep bringing up the loss column as almost more important. I don't know if it's more important or not, but it's there's a reason why you emphasize that. So 2 games in the standings, 1 game in the loss column separate Minnesota and Cleveland with about 60 games left. Similar situations going on in the National League Central. The Milwaukee Brewers are 57-46. Cincinnati is 56-48. Only 2 back in the loss column. The Brewers are a game and a half ahead in the standings altogether. Now, Cincinnati has a slight advantage over whoever the runner-up is, whether it's Cleveland or Minnesota, in the Central because as of this recording, Cincinnati remains a wild card team. Also, as of this recording, they're in a virtual tie with Arizona, San Francisco, and themselves for the wild card. How that will be, how that will be parsoned off, I don't know. Neither do you. There's a possibility of anarchy, and I love that. But what these teams have to do is take a good long look in the mirror and say, what are we really trying to do in this situation? For the Reds, this is a surprise contention year. They've already done the first step that I've been begging every team to do, which is bring up all your best players. If you're trying to contend right now, who knows? You may have that star on your team right now, just languishing in the minor leagues. Bring them up. Bring them up. For the Reds, nobody was expecting this team to contend at least this deep in the year because I think most people thought the main contender was going to be the St. Louis Cardinals. Well, the Cardinals are terrible this year, or certainly not contenders. They're going to have to go on a rampage to get to third place, and I think the chances of them being a wild card team are virtually none. And with the fact that they're going to be trading off Flaherty and Montgomery and several of their other key players, they may even deal off Goldschmidt and Arenado and do a full-on rebuild in St. Louis, which I don't think would be the worst thing in the world, but I think they need to get a new GM before they start that. That means that Cincy and Milwaukee are the teams to beat, and one of those teams will be representing the Central. For the Reds to be contending at this point is a huge surprise, and I think they need to make, in some ways, I think they need to make a trade. They need to make a deal. And when the kind of trade that they need to make is not a gigantic blockbuster. They're not going to be in the Shohei Ohtani race. They're not going to be in, the Justin Verlander race. But if they could just make a deal for a major leaguer, even if it's someone who's not going to make a gigantic impact, if they called up the White Sox and picked up Joe Kelly, if they made a call to the A's and picked up one of their relievers, just a major leaguer is added to the roster. In some ways, I can't help but think, but that would add a sort of, for the lack of a better word, a giant boost of confidence in the Reds clubhouse to basically say, hey, they're on our side. At least they're trying to do something. They know the team doesn't have the deepest pockets. They know that this team is not going to be, the landing spot of giant superstars. But if they get that sense of, hey, we are going to clinch this. We are going to at least come out and do our best and at least try to give you another major leaguer. That seems to be something, if nothing else, that would give them a little boost of happiness. If nothing else, that would give them a little bit of, I don't know, for the lack of a better word, a sense of accomplishment and a sense that their team has their back. Their team has their back. And it doesn't have to be a blockbuster. It's just like, oh, you think we're going to win? Great. Now, I think the Brewers, this sounds weird. I would immediately right now open up negotiations with Corbin Burns, or at least publicly say we're offering him a new contract. The Brewers have a number in their head of what they would offer Corbin Burns to have him stay. And the possibility of Burns leaving was kind of hanging over this team at the beginning of the year to say, maybe, just maybe, if we fall out of contention the way the Cardinals did, we can get great things for Burns. I don't know if they really want to keep Burns, but if they at least start making overtures of, hey, we want to keep you around, that also could send the message to the team and the fan base, for that matter, that like, hey, we're playing not just for this year, but we're playing for the future. And it wouldn't be bad publicity for the team. I'll tell you, though, a team that is one of the teams that's up there evidently listened to my advice, because I went on a big rant not too long ago, and I had Brandon Warren on. We were talking about this with the Twins. that I was saying that it is essential that the Twins do what the Cincinnati Reds did, which is bring up all your best players. Anybody remotely able to contribute to a major league roster has to be brought up right away, because these races are going to be so airtight, and if you can fix a hole from within and you got someone playing very well in the minor leagues, put them up right now in the major leagues. And Matt Wallner was the player who I kept bringing up, the Minnesota native who was tearing it up in the minor leagues. I said he is completely being wasted there. Those hits could be done on the major league level. Well, did you listen closely when I was doing the Twins recap? He's on the team. He's played about 20 games in the major league. So he was called up not too long after I did that show with Brandon Warren. And how's he doing? Well, today he hit 2 homers. They added a player from within. Wallner hit 2 home runs today. In limited time, he's batting .294 with an OPS of .988. Is it a small sample size? Yeah. Do you know what's also a small sample size? 60 games. A team can play like world beaters in 60 games. Just look at the Tampa Bay Rays, who for the first 60 games of this season looked like they were on pace to win 150 games or something crazy like that. You're not asking for a team to go on a rampage for a full season, just to play really well for the final 2 months. Now, the prize is a Central Division. What does that mean? Well, it hasn't mean anything since the Cubs beat the Cleveland Indians, and that's what they were called then, for the 2016 World Series title. Those were the last time the Central was even represented in the World Series. But get in, take your shot, and make the moves that give the team confidence that they have your back, or you have their back, or his backs are had. Because in so many ways, with so many of these teams overachieving, just the sense of you think we could do this may be the difference between a game or 2 in the loss column, which I'll explain soon why that's important. For this segment, I'm going to answer directly one of my my Panorama Jazz band. He's a did I get the whole name right? The Panorama Jazz Band and Panorama Brass Band. That's right. I knew it was more complicated than that. One of my loyal listeners, big Baltimore Orioles fan. Hey, Sully, what is the significance of being X games back in the loss column, as in versus such and such games back? It sounds meaningful. I haven't figured that out yet. I'm going to do my best to try to give a simple explanation. If, like, let's say, I'm going to just go to one of the teams that we mentioned right now, that if a team is trailing someone in the standings, it isn't always the case that the teams have played the same number of games. For example, Minnesota is 54-50, Cleveland is 51-51. The Twins have played 2 more games than the Cleveland Indians. Got it wrong. The Guardians. Sorry. They played, because I said Indians when I was referring to the World Series, and so okay, forgive me. So Minnesota's played 2 more games than Cleveland. I'll stay out of trouble that way. So, but only 1 game separates the 2 in the loss column. You can always add wins. If Cleveland wants to catch up to Minnesota, they have to they can win. They could go 3-0. And Minnesota can lose one game and they'd be matched. You can always add to the win column, but you cannot subtract from the loss column. So when you take a look at how far a team is back, you can make up those wins. That's part of the goal. Let's get those wins, but you cannot remove any numbers from there. Cleveland won't suddenly have 50 losses. They have 51 and counting. But you can add to the win column. So because it's harder it's harder to make up, to make up ground if you're significantly back in the loss column because the other team could keep winning too. You can't remove losses, but you can add wins. So I guess it's the permanency of a loss is what gives the emphasis to the loss column. It also emphasizes, however, that the teams don't have an even number of games that they've played. It's not equal. So I guess that's the main reason. I could just say with the with the games back situation, but it also when you have a situation when you have a virtual tie, like right now, Arizona, San Francisco, and Cincinnati are all in a virtual tie. But Cincinnati has one more win than San Francisco and Arizona, and also one more loss. So they're not exactly tied. It just evens out that way. Hopefully, I've explained that in some way, shape, or form. For today's trivia question, I don't think I've done this one before. If I have, forgive me. If I have, forgive me. I should write down the questions, but here. This is a postseason trivia question. What was the only time you've seen lots of times where a postseason series ends with a walk-off hit, a walk-off home run. There's even been walk-off wild pitches and walk-off bases loaded walks. But only once in the history of the postseason has a postseason series ended with an RBI single by the visiting team. You heard me right. The visiting team got an RBI single, and that was the last play of that series. Which series am I talking about? What series am I talking about? The series ended with the team on the road knocking in a run. If you get that one, send it to Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram, here in the YouTube comments, or at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or on Instagram. Breaking down the American League and National League Central and seeing that a whole lot of this has to do with the image of confidence. This has been Locked On MLB for the 27th day of July, 2023. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.